The last photograph ever taken of the Evergreen Seven shows them standing at the trailhead, smiling. Daniel Hartwell has his arm around his wife, Sofia. David Whitmore is adjusting his pack straps. The Morrison sisters, twins identical down to their hiking boots, are laughing at something just off camera. Behind them, retired Army Sergeant Thomas Bear Rawlings towers over everyone, his weathered face creased in a rare grin. And there, slightly apart from the group, stands Dr. Catherine Price, her expression already focused on the mountain ahead. 7 experienced hikers. Combined, they had over 200 years of wilderness expertise. They had conquered Kilimanjaro, survived the Appalachian Trail in winter, navigated Patagonia's unforgiving terrain. And yet, on October 14, 2019, they walked into Colorado's San Juan Mountains and simply ceased to exist. What I'm about to share with you isn't just another missing persons case. This is a story that consumed 3 years of my life, cost me my marriage, and nearly killed me twice. My name is Sarah Vance, and I was the lead search and rescue coordinator for the initial 72-hour operation. What we found in those mountains, and what we didn't find, haunts me to this day. But I need you to understand something before we go any further. This story has an ending, and that ending? It's one nobody saw coming. Before you continue watching, I need you to do something for me. If you know someone who loves the outdoors, someone who hikes alone, someone who thinks they're invincible because they've done it 1,000 times before, share this video with them right now. What happened to the Evergreen Seven could happen to anyone. Don't let someone you love become another cautionary tale. And if you want to see this story through to its conclusion, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. Because trust me, you don't want to miss how this ends. Let me take you back to where it all began. The Evergreen Hiking Club wasn't your typical weekend warrior outfit. These weren't Instagram influencers chasing content or inexperienced tourists who'd watched one too many survival shows. They were a tight-knit group forged through years of shared adversity. Daniel Hartwell, 47, had been a professional mountain guide for 2 decades before transitioning to corporate leadership training. His wife, Sofia, 45, was a trauma surgeon who'd served with Doctors Without Borders in some of the world's most dangerous conflict zones. Together, they'd led expeditions to raise money for children's cancer research. Their love story was legendary within the hiking community. They'd met during a rescue operation on Denali, Daniel dangling from a rope, Sofia providing emergency medical care to a hypothermic climber 300 feet above certain death. David Whitmore, 52, was the group's unofficial historian and navigator. A cartographer by profession, he'd spent 30 years mapping remote wilderness areas for the United States Geological Survey. He could read terrain the way most people read newspapers, and he'd never once been lost. Not in the Amazon, not in the Gobi Desert, not anywhere. The Morrison sisters, Stephanie and Michelle, both 38, had been hiking since they could walk. Their parents, both park rangers, had raised them in the shadow of Mount Rainier, and the twins had turned their childhood into a career. They ran a successful wilderness survival school in Denver, teaching others the skills they'd absorbed through osmosis. They could build shelter from nothing, start fire in rain, find water in desert. They'd written 2 best-selling books on wilderness preparedness. Bear Rawlings, 61, was perhaps the most capable of them all. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, and 15 years as a survival instructor for Special Operations Forces. He'd been shot twice, survived a helicopter crash, and once walked 40 miles through enemy territory with a broken ankle. When people talked about tough, they used Bear Rawlings as the measuring stick. And then there was Dr. Catherine Price, 55, a renowned botanist specializing in high-altitude plant species. She joined the group 3 years earlier. Quieter than the others, more reserved, but equally competent. She'd spent months alone in research stations across the Himalayas, the Andes, the Alps. Solitude in extreme environments wasn't just comfortable for her. It was where she did her best work. Together, they called themselves the Evergreen Seven. The name started as a joke, a reference to both their Colorado home base and the evergreen resilience they prided themselves on. But like all things with this group, it stuck. The trip that would become their last was supposed to be routine. A 7-day trek through the Weminuche Wilderness, Colorado's largest wilderness area, covering roughly 100 miles of the most remote terrain the lower 48 had to offer. They'd done similar routes dozens of times. This particular path would take them through alpine meadows, past forgotten mining claims, over 3 passes above 12,000 feet, and into valleys that hadn't seen human footprints in decades. I spoke with Daniel's brother, Ryan, in the weeks after the disappearance. He told me Daniel had been in excellent spirits in the days leading up to the trip. He called me that Sunday night, Ryan said, his voice catching. We talked for almost an hour about nothing in particular. Fantasy football, our mom's birthday coming up, the trip, of course. He said he was looking forward to the disconnection. No phones, no email, no responsibilities except putting one foot in front of the other. The group departed from their staging area at the 30-mile campground at 6:47 a.m. on October 14th. We know this because Bear Rawlings, ever the military man, logged their departure time in a small notebook he kept for every expedition. That notebook would become crucial evidence, but that comes later. Sofia Hartwell had texted her sister from the parking lot at 6:42 a.m. Heading out. See you in 8 days. Don't worry about us. We've got enough supplies for twice that long. Love you. It was the last communication any of them would have with the outside world. They were scheduled to emerge from the wilderness on October 21st at the Big Meadows trailhead, approximately 87 miles from their starting point. When October 21st came and went with no sign of the group, Sofia's sister, Lucia, called the local sheriff's department. By noon on October 22nd, I was mobilizing the largest search operation in San Juan County history. What none of us knew then, what we couldn't have known, was that we weren't just looking for missing hikers. We were about to uncover a secret that had been buried in those mountains for almost 50 years. Search and rescue operations in the San Juan Mountains are never simple. The terrain is punishing: steep valleys, dense forests, loose scree fields that can shift without warning. Weather can change from bluebird skies to deadly whiteout in less than an hour. And in late October, winter is already sinking its teeth into the high country. But I'd done this before, dozens of times. I knew the protocols, trusted my team, and genuinely believed we'd have the Evergreen Seven located within 48 hours. We established our command post at the 30-mile campground, the same spot where the group had begun their journey. From there, we could access multiple trail systems and coordinate with the helicopter teams working the higher elevations. I had 32 ground searchers, for dog teams, thermal imaging equipment, and full support from both state and federal resources. On paper, everything looked good. Our initial search plan focused on the primary route the group had filed with the Forest Service. We knew their intended camps for each night, their planned passes, their emergency contingencies. David Whitmore had, characteristically, provided more detail than most search coordinators ever dream of receiving. His itinerary included GPS coordinates, elevation profiles, water source locations, and even notes about potential hazards. It was the work of a methodical mind, and it should have made finding them straightforward. The first day yielded nothing. No sign of camps, no discarded gear, no footprints in the early season snow that had dusted the upper elevations. The dogs picked up scent trails at the trailhead, but lost them within the first 3 miles. This wasn't unusual. Scent disperses, especially with the temperature fluctuations common in alpine environments. But by the end of day 1, a small knot of anxiety had begun forming in my chest. Day 2 brought our first significant discovery. One of my ground teams, searching an alternate route that ran parallel to the group's planned path, found a single hiking pole wedged between 2 boulders near Flint Creek. The pole was identified by Lucia as belonging to her sister Sofia. It bore distinctive tape wrapping on the grip, orange and white, Chicago Bears colors, Sofia's favorite team. The pole was bent slightly, as if it had been caught in something and yanked hard. But there was no blood, no other gear, no indication of what might have happened. I remember standing at that spot, holding the pole in my gloved hands, and feeling something shift in my understanding of this case. Experienced hikers don't lose their gear. They especially don't lose a hiking pole in terrain like this without stopping to retrieve it. Unless they couldn't. Unless something prevented them. We expanded our search radius. I called in additional teams. A second helicopter was assigned to our operation. And still, for 3 more days, we found absolutely nothing else. It was as if the Evergreen Seven had walked off the edge of the earth. On day 5, everything changed. A dog team working a remote drainage called Boulder Basin picked up a scent trail and followed it to an old mining structure, one of hundreds scattered throughout these mountains from the silver boom of the 1880s. The structure was barely standing. 3 walls of weathered timber, a collapsed roof, vegetation growing through every gap. But inside, we found something that made no sense. There were signs of recent habitation. Not camping. Exactly. Something more permanent. A stack of modern canned goods. A sleeping bag rated for extreme cold. A small propane stove. And on the wall, pinned to rotting wood with a single rusted nail, was a map. But it wasn't any map I'd ever seen. Hand-drawn, incredibly detailed, it showed the surrounding terrain with accuracy that rivaled David Whitmore's professional work. Trails were marked in different colors: green, yellow, red. The red trails were crossed with X marks at irregular intervals. My team photographed everything before we touched it. Standard protocol. But when I finally lifted that map from the wall, I found something that nearly stopped my heart. Written on the back, in pencil, were 7 names. The Evergreen Seven. All of them. Beneath the names was a single phrase. They came too close. We never determined who had been staying in that mining structure. The FBI later analyzed the supplies and gear, tracking some items to a camping store in Durango, others to retailers in Albuquerque. All paid for in cash. All purchased over a period spanning 8 months. Someone had been living in these mountains, off the grid, watching, waiting. The discovery transformed our search operation into something else entirely. What had been a missing persons case became a potential crime scene. Federal agents arrived. State investigators took over coordination. I was pushed to the periphery of my own operation, reduced to answering questions instead of asking them. But I couldn't let it go. These were experienced people, the best of the best. Whatever had happened to them, they hadn't gone quietly. I was certain of that. And somewhere in that vast wilderness, answers were waiting. On day 7 of the search, with temperatures dropping and resources stretching thin, we found Bear Rawlings's notebook. It was wedged in a crevice near Hunchback Pass, almost 12 miles from the mining structure, in completely the opposite direction from where it should have been based on the group's planned route. The notebook was damaged, water-stained, some pages torn, but readable. What Bear Rawlings had written in those pages would redefine everything we thought we knew about the Evergreen Seven's final days. Bear Rawlings wrote like he did everything else, with military precision and an economy of words. His notebook contained their trip log, updated each evening, with entries for weather conditions, miles traveled, notable observations, and any deviations from their planned route. For the first 3 days, everything was routine. Cold mornings, warm afternoons, beautiful terrain. They were making good time, spirits were high. Day 4's entry was different. 1,430 hours. Michelle Morrison spotted what she thought was a person observing us from the tree-line above camp. Binoculars showed nothing. David thinks it was a deer or elk. But Michelle is certain. She's spooked. Not like her. Sofia suggested we should adjust our route to stay closer to established trails. Group voted to continue as planned. I'm inclined to agree with Sofia. Day 5's entry grew longer. We're being followed. I'm certain now. Saw him myself at dawn. Human silhouette on the ridge to our east, approximately 400 meters. By the time I got my binoculars up, gone. Everyone's on edge. Daniel wants to cut the trip short, head for the nearest evacuation point. David argues we're overreacting, that the mountains play tricks on people's minds. Catherine hasn't said much. She's been taking plant samples as if nothing is wrong. The twins are sticking together more than usual. We've decided to continue, but with increased vigilance. Night watches from here on out. Day 6 contained only 3 words. We found it. Found what? That question tormented me. I read those 3 words 1,000 times, trying to extract meaning from the minimalist phrase. What could they have discovered that merited such sparse documentation from a man who recorded everything? Day 7 answered nothing. Moving fast. Can't write. He's closer. So many of them. Day 8 was the last entry. It was written in handwriting that looked rushed, almost frantic, completely unlike Bear's usual careful script. If anyone finds this, Blackwood, research everything. The caves, the mining company, the cover-up. They killed for this before. They're killing for it again. We split up to improve odds. I'm drawing them west. The others are heading for big meadows. Pray they make it. Semper Fi. Blackwood. That single word became my obsession. The official search was suspended after 2 weeks. The FBI's investigation continued, but yielded no arrests, no suspects, no concrete answers. The prevailing theory, announced at a press conference I refused to attend, was that the group had encountered dangerous wildlife, possibly a mountain lion or bear, and scattered in panic. The harsh terrain and early winter storms had done the rest. The case was classified as presumed fatal, pending the discovery of remains. I didn't believe it. Not for a second. I began researching Blackwood on my own time, late nights after my shift, weekends when I should have been with my family. My husband, James, tried to be patient. He understood that search and rescue workers often carry cases with them, that some mysteries refuse to stay buried. But as weeks turned to months, as my obsession consumed more and more of our life together, his patience ran out. "You need to let this go," he told me one night, finding me at the kitchen table surrounded by old newspaper clippings and mining records. 7 people died in the mountains, Sarah. It's tragic, but it happens. You can't bring them back. "I'm not trying to bring them back," I replied, not looking up. "I'm trying to find out what really happened." "And what if you do? What if you find out something terrible? Will that change anything? Will it bring you peace?" I didn't have an answer for him. Within 6 months, he'd moved out. Within a year, the divorce was final. And still, I kept searching. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it before answering in the comments below. Have you ever been so certain about something that you were willing to risk everything, your relationships, your career, your own safety, to prove you were right? What would you sacrifice for the truth? Blackwood, I eventually discovered, wasn't a person. It was a company. Blackwood Mining Consortium had operated in the San Juan Mountains from 1871 to 1923, extracting silver, gold, and a variety of lesser minerals from dozens of claims scattered throughout the region. On paper, they were one of hundreds of similar operations that had defined Colorado's mountain heritage. But the deeper I dug, the stranger the story became. In 1922, Blackwood geologists had discovered something unusual in a network of caves near what is now the Weminuche wilderness. Company records from that period are sparse, suspiciously so, but I found references to the formation in personal letters between executives. Whatever the formation was, it had generated enormous excitement, and then, suddenly, nothing. In 1923, Blackwood Mining Consortium was dissolved. All claims were abandoned. Key company officials scattered to different states, different countries, and 11 workers, all employees who had been assigned to the cave system, were listed as having died in a mining accident. Their bodies were never recovered. The more I learned about Blackwood, the more I realized how deep the conspiracy ran. This wasn't just about a mining company or a century-old secret. Something in those caves was worth killing for, and whatever it was still being protected 100 years later. I tracked down descendants of the original Blackwood executives. Most refused to speak with me. Doors were closed in my face. Phone calls were terminated. Emails went unanswered. But finally, in the spring of 2021, 18 months after the Evergreen Seven disappeared, I found someone willing to talk. His name was Harold Brennan, 94 years old, living in a memory care facility outside Tucson. His grandfather, William Brennan, had been Blackwood's chief geologist, the man who had discovered the formation in 1922. Harold was dying. He knew it, his doctors knew it, and maybe that's why he finally decided to share what he'd kept secret his entire life. My grandfather went into those caves a rational man and came out broken, Harold told me, his voice like paper tearing. He never spoke about what he saw, not directly. But he had nightmares until the day he died. He'd wake up screaming about the chamber and what they did. My grandmother learned not to ask questions. What do you think they found? I pressed. Harold's eyes, clouded with cataracts, seemed to focus on something far beyond the walls of his small room. Something that shouldn't exist. Something that proved everything we think we know about the world is wrong. He paused, gathering strength. There are crystals in those caves, Miss Vance. Not ordinary crystals. My grandfather kept one. Just a small piece, hidden in a lead-lined box. I have it still. When you hold it, you hear things. See things. Things that haven't happened yet. I thought he was confused, mixing reality with dementia's distortions. But he insisted on showing me. His trembling hands produced a key, directed me to a locked drawer in his dresser. Inside, beneath decades of accumulated papers and photographs, was a small metal box. Go ahead, he said. Open it. But be careful, and don't hold it for long. The crystal was roughly the size of my thumb, translucent with swirls of color that seemed to move within its structure. Deep purple, electric blue, veins of gold. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Then I touched it. The sensation is difficult to describe. It felt like falling and flying simultaneously. The room around me dissolved, replaced by darkness, then by images that came too fast to process. Mountains, snow, figures running through trees, a cave entrance, massive, hidden behind a waterfall, and then faces. 7 faces. The Evergreen Seven. They were alive. Scared, exhausted, but alive. And they were looking directly at me. The vision lasted perhaps 3 seconds. When it ended, I was on the floor of Harold's room, the crystal several feet away from where I dropped it, and the old man was smiling. You saw them, didn't you? They're still out there. They found the cave. And now they can't leave. That should have been my breaking point. The moment I accepted I'd gone too far, that grief and obsession had broken my grip on reality. Any rational person would have walked away, checked themselves into therapy, and tried to rebuild their life. Instead, I started planning an expedition. I knew I couldn't go alone. The San Juan Mountains in winter would kill a solo traveler quickly, no matter their experience. I needed a team, people with skills, with wilderness expertise, and most importantly, with reason to believe my impossible story. I found them in the families of the Evergreen Seven. Ryan Hartwell, Daniel's brother, had never accepted the official explanation. A wilderness photographer by trade, he knew the mountains and knew his brother. Daniel wouldn't panic and scatter, he told me when I approached him. That's not who he was. If something made him deviate from the plan, it was calculated. Lucia Mendez, Sofia's sister, was a former park ranger who'd spent years working in remote locations. The disappearance had shattered her. She'd left her job, fallen into depression, emerged only through the determination to find answers. When I showed her the crystal, when she touched it and saw her own vision, the questions in her eyes transformed into resolve. The Morrison sisters' parents, both in their 70s but still hiking regularly, insisted on joining despite my protests. Those are our daughters, Martha Morrison said simply. If there's even a chance they're alive, we're going. We recruited 2 others, Dr. Samuel Wright, a geologist who'd studied the Blackwood mining claims as part of his doctoral research and had been quietly obsessed with the formation for years, and Jacob Rawlings, Bear's nephew, a Marine who'd served 2 tours before returning home to follow his uncle into search and rescue. Jacob was skeptical of my theories, but loyal to Bear's memory. If my uncle thought something was worth dying for, I need to know what it was. We trained through the winter, studying maps, conditioning our bodies, stockpiling supplies. Dr. Wright's research had given us coordinates, approximate locations where the cave system should be, based on 100-year-old geological surveys and mineral deposit patterns. The area was officially closed to the public, part of a wildlife preservation zone established in 1948. The timing of that closure, I noted, coincided with early nuclear testing in Nevada. Someone had wanted people to stay away from these caves. Someone with government connections. In April 2022, 2.5 years after the disappearance of the Evergreen Seven, our team of 7, there was dark irony in that number, departed for the San Juan Mountains. We told no one where we were going. We filed no permits, left no detailed itineraries. Whatever we found in those caves, we would face alone. I knew we might be walking into our own deaths. We all knew. But the possibility of finding answers, of finding them, was worth any risk. The first 3 days of our expedition were uneventful. We crossed into the closed zone without detection, moving carefully along old game trails that avoided any established routes. The weather cooperated, cold but clear, perfect for covering ground. Dr. Wright's navigation was impeccable, and we made excellent time toward the coordinates his research had identified. On day 4, we found the first marker. It was carved into a tree, a symbol I didn't recognize, something like a stylized spiral with radiating lines. Dr. Wright photographed it, his face pale. "This matches petroglyphs I've seen in my research," he said quietly. Native American tribes considered certain caves in this region taboo, forbidden places. They believed something lived in those caves, something that didn't belong to our world. We found more markers as we continued, a trail of them leading deeper into territory that appeared on no maps. The terrain grew increasingly difficult, dense undergrowth, steep ravines, and an unsettling sense of being watched that we all felt, but nobody verbalized. On day 5, we found the waterfall. It was exactly as my vision had shown, a massive cascade of water dropping perhaps 100 feet into a pool that disappeared into underground channels. The volume was extraordinary for a location this remote, suggesting a vast aquifer system beneath the mountains. And behind the waterfall, barely visible through the spray, was the entrance to a cave. Getting behind the waterfall required traversing a narrow ledge that seemed purpose-built, too regular to be natural, carved into the rock face with ancient precision. One by one, we made the crossing, each step bringing us closer to answers that had waited 100 years to be found. The cave entrance was massive, easily 40 feet high and twice as wide. Even before we entered, I could feel something different about this place. A subtle vibration in the air, a pressure that seemed to push against my thoughts. Martha Morrison hesitated at the threshold. "Do you feel that?" she asked. We all felt it. Inside, the darkness was absolute. Our headlamps seemed weaker than they should, their beams swallowed by shadows that felt almost physical. The cave walls glittered with mineral deposits, but as we moved deeper, I realized these weren't ordinary minerals. The same swirling colors I'd seen in Harold Brennan's crystal were everywhere here, veins of impossible material threading through the rock like a circulatory system. We walked for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one, descending gradually into the mountain's heart. The cave branched repeatedly, but there was only ever one correct path. The others dead-ended after a few feet, as if the mountain itself was guiding us where it wanted us to go. And then we heard voices, distant at first, barely distinguishable from the water sounds that echoed through the chambers. But as we continued, they grew clearer, speaking, sometimes laughing. Normal human conversation. We emerged into a chamber that defied comprehension. The space was enormous, cathedral-sized, lit by the crystalline formations that covered every surface and emitted a soft, pulsing luminescence. The ceiling disappeared into shadows far above, and the floor was divided into distinct areas, sleeping spaces, a cooking area, storage sections organized with military precision. It looked like a survival camp designed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And there, gathered around a small fire in the chamber's center, were 7 people. The Evergreen Seven. Sofia Hartwell saw us first. She rose slowly, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Disbelief, hope, fear, joy. Then she was running toward us, and Lucia was running toward her, and the 2 sisters collided in an embrace that carried 2.5 years of grief and longing. The reunion was overwhelming. Martha and Richard Morrison clutching their daughters, tears streaming down weathered faces. Ryan Hartwell gripping his brother's shoulders, unable to speak. Jacob Rawlings and Bear, the nephew and uncle, clasping forearms in a gesture that spoke volumes without words. I stood apart from the reunions, watching, my own eyes wet. They were alive. Against all logic, against everything I'd been told was possible, the Evergreen Seven were alive. It was Catherine Price who finally broke away and approached me. Her expression was serious, and in her eyes I saw the weight of knowledge that had been carried too long. "You're the search coordinator," she said. It wasn't a question. "We saw you, you know. In the crystals. Watching. Searching. We knew someone would come eventually, but we couldn't leave to find you." "Why not?" I managed. Catherine gestured to the crystalline walls surrounding us. "Because they won't let us. And because if we leave, if we take even one crystal beyond these caves, the whole world will come looking for what's here. And the world isn't ready for what's here." "What is here?" I asked. "What is this place?" Catherine looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled, and there was sadness in it. "The future," she said. "The past. Everything that could be and everything that was. This place exists outside normal time. We've been here for 2.5 years by your measurement. For us, it's been different. Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. The crystals show us things, give us knowledge, abilities. But they also trap us." "Who is they?" "The people who were watching you, who followed you. The Guardians." Daniel Hartwell had joined us, his arm around his brother. "They've been protecting this place for generations. Some are descendants of the original native tribes who knew about these caves. Others are descendants of the Blackwood miners who survived the accident and understood what they'd found. They live in the mountains, watching, ensuring nobody else discovers what's here." "But why let you live? Why not just kill us?" Bear Rawlings finished, stepping into the conversation. "They tried. At first. But once we found the cave, once we touched the crystals, we became connected to this place. Killing us would have consequences they didn't want to face. So instead, they watch. They wait. And we stay." The full explanation took hours, shared in fragments around the fire, as both groups merged into one. "The crystals," Dr. Catherine Price explained, "were unlike anything known to science. They existed in multiple temporal states simultaneously, present, past, and future overlapping within their structure. When touched, they allowed access to these states. Visions. Knowledge. Sometimes even glimpses of other possibilities, other versions of reality. The Blackwood miners had stumbled onto this chamber in 1922. Most had been killed not by the Guardians, but by their own greed and fear. Fighting over the crystals, exposing themselves to prolonged contact that their minds couldn't process. The survivors had joined with the indigenous Guardians, understanding that this discovery must remain secret. "But why?" I pressed. "If these crystals could help people, show the future, prevent disasters, why hide them?" Daniel Hartwell answered. "Think about what would happen if this became public knowledge. Governments would fight wars over this place. Corporations would tear these mountains apart to extract every crystal. And the contact, prolonged exposure, it changes people. Not always for the better." He didn't elaborate, but I'd noticed something off about the Evergreen Seven since our reunion. Small things. The way they sometimes finished each other's sentences, even when separated by the length of the chamber. The distant look in their eyes, as if seeing things invisible to the rest of us. The Morrison twins moved in perfect synchronization, their twin bond amplified into something that bordered on telepathy. The crystals had changed them, given them gifts but extracted a price. "We can leave," Sofia said quietly. "We've learned to manage what the crystals give us. But we choose to stay. This place, this knowledge, it needs protection. The world the Guardians feared is even more dangerous now. Social media, satellite surveillance, climate change forcing people into wilderness areas. Eventually, someone else will find these caves. And when they do, we need to be here. To guide them. To prevent another Blackwood." "So you're just going to stay? Forever? Give up your lives?" Bear Rawlings shook his head. "We didn't give anything up. We found purpose. Everything I did before, the military service, the survival training, the rescue work, it was all leading here. I was meant to protect this place. We all were." The fire crackled between us, casting dancing shadows on the crystalline walls. I thought about the years I'd spent searching, the marriage I'd lost, the obsession that had consumed my life. I'd come here looking for closure. What I'd found was far more complicated. What about us? Lucia asked, clutching her sister's hand as if afraid Sofia might disappear again. We came to find you, to bring you home. Sofia looked at her sister with tears in her eyes. Lucia, my brave, stubborn sister. You found me. That's all I ever wanted. But home isn't a place anymore. It's this. It's them. She gestured to the group around her. I need you to understand. And I need you to help. Help how? By going back. By telling the families we're gone. Lost in the mountains, never to be found. In the searches, the investigations, the questions. Let us become ghosts. She paused. And then, if you choose, come back. This place has room for more guardians. The crystals showed us this moment, showed us your faces. You were always meant to be part of this. It was an impossible choice. Go home. Carry the burden of a lie that would haunt us forever, and then abandon our own lives to join a secret society guarding an impossible discovery? Or refuse, return to the world with a truth nobody would believe, and live with the knowledge that we'd abandoned the people we'd fought so hard to find? I looked around at my team. Ryan Hartwell's jaw was tight, his eyes locked on his brother. Lucia was whispering something to Sofia, their heads close together. The Morrisons, parents and daughters, were simply holding each other, as if touch could bridge the gap that time and circumstance had created. Jacob Rawlings stood beside his uncle, and I could see the struggle on his face, duty warring with disbelief. Dr. Samuel Wright had wandered to the chamber's edge, examining the crystalline formations with the focused intensity of a man whose life's work had suddenly materialized before him. He wasn't part of these emotional reckonings. His investment was intellectual, not personal. But when he turned to face the group, his expression made my blood run cold. Someone's coming, he said. I touched one of the crystals. I saw them. A lot of them. Military gear, heavy weapons. They're 3 hours behind us. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Daniel and Bear exchanged glances that spoke of contingency plans long prepared. The Guardians? I asked. Bear shook his head. Worse. We've always known this day might come. There are those who've spent years searching for this place, who know enough to be dangerous. We thought we'd have more time. Who are they? Catherine stepped forward, her voice clinical despite the tension. A private intelligence group. They've been acquiring crystal fragments on the black market for decades, pieces that escaped these caves over the years. They know enough about the crystal's properties to want the source. And they have resources, connections, ruthlessness that the Guardians can't match. Why didn't you tell us this before? Because there was a chance they weren't tracking you. There was a chance your expedition went unnoticed. She glanced at the crystal Dr. Wright had touched. Now we know they weren't. Now we know they're coming. 3 hours isn't much time when you're preparing to defend a position, but Bear Rawlings had spent decades making much with less. He transformed from the philosophical protector I'd been speaking with into the tactical commander he'd been in another life, issuing orders with quiet confidence. The cave system, he explained, had multiple defensible points. The entrance behind the waterfall was the most obvious approach, but there were other access points, narrow passages, hidden tunnels, choke points where a few defenders could hold against many. We've prepared for this, Daniel added. Not happily, but realistically. The Guardians have supplies cached throughout these caves. Weapons, equipment, everything we might need for a prolonged siege. My team, civilians all, despite our training, were given positions and instructions. Lucia and Sofia would hold a secondary tunnel entrance together. Their reunion transformed into a partnership of necessity. The Morrison parents, despite their age, proved surprisingly capable with the modified crossbows the Guardians had developed for silent defense. Ryan Hartwell and his brother covered the main approach. Years of unspoken tension dissolved into wordless cooperation. I was placed with Catherine Price at the chamber's center, protecting the heart of what everyone was fighting for and over. You should go, Catherine said as we settled into our position. There's a back passage, nearly impossible to navigate, but it leads to the surface. You could get out. Bring help. I spent 2 years of my life looking for you. I'm not leaving now. She smiled slightly. The crystals showed us that too. Your determination. The marriages you'd sacrifice, the career you'd risk. We weren't sure you'd actually come, but we hoped. The crystals can see the future. The crystals see possibilities. Branches on a tree, each one leading to different outcomes. The more likely the branch, the clearer the vision. Your coming here was always likely. You have something rare. A refusal to accept the easy answer. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you understand. What happens in the next few hours, that's not predetermined. The crystals show a dozen different outcomes, some where we triumph, some where we fall, some where the secret of this place spreads across the world with catastrophic consequences. Every action we take collapses possibilities into a single reality. Right now, the future is more uncertain than it's been in decades. The sound of gunfire ended our conversation. The attack came from multiple directions simultaneously, professional, coordinated, exactly what you'd expect from a well-funded private military force. They'd clearly studied the cave system somehow, knew the alternate entrances, had technology our defenders lacked. The advantage we had was knowledge. Knowledge of these specific caves, of their hidden dangers, of the crystalline energy that permeated every surface. I won't pretend what followed was heroic in any cinematic sense. It was chaos, terror, moments of desperate action punctuated by periods of hiding and praying. People were wounded. I took a bullet graze across my shoulder that burned like fire and bled more than I would have expected. Jacob Rawlings saved his uncle's life with a shot that would have been impossible if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. But the crystals were our secret weapon. As the battle progressed, as stress and fear pushed us to our limits, those who'd been exposed to the crystals, the Evergreen Seven, and now several of us, began experiencing something extraordinary. Time seemed to slow during critical moments. Movements became predictable, almost readable. When an attacker rounded a corner, I knew where he would be before he appeared. When a grenade was thrown, my body was already moving to cover before my conscious mind registered the threat. The crystals were protecting us. Or perhaps more accurately, the connection we'd formed with them was manifesting in ways that defied explanation. The turning point came near the third hour of fighting. Our attackers had been driven back to the main entrance, their numbers significantly reduced, but still dangerous. Their leader, a woman with silver hair and cold eyes, whose face I would later learn belonged to someone very high in certain government circles, stood at the threshold of the chamber, weapon raised, demands on her lips. "We only want the crystals," she said, her voice echoing off crystalline walls. "Give us access and you'll be allowed to leave. This place will be studied, protected, utilized properly. Fight us and you all die here. It's simple mathematics." Bear Rawlings stepped forward. "You want to know what's simple mathematics? The dozen of your people we've already put down. The fact that even if you kill all of us, you'll never understand what this place is. The crystals don't work for people like you. They show you what you want to see, tell you what you want to hear, and then they destroy you. That's what happened to Blackwood. That's what will happen to you. Then show me." The woman's smile was predatory. "Let me touch one. If what you say is true, I'll know immediately. If you're lying, if you're just protecting something valuable, I'll know that too." It was Catherine who made the decision. She walked toward the woman, a small crystal in her palm, moving with the certainty of someone who'd already seen how this moment would unfold. "Take it," Catherine said. "See for yourself." The woman's eyes glittered with triumph as she took the crystal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her face went slack, her eyes rolled back, and she began to scream. Not in pain, in terror. Whatever visions the crystal was showing her, they were not what she'd expected. She screamed for almost a minute before dropping the crystal and staggering backward, her composure shattered. What was that?" she gasped. "The truth," Catherine said quietly. "Every consequence of every action you've ever taken. Every life your organization has destroyed. Every future your greed will create. The crystals don't judge, they just show. And some people can't bear to see themselves clearly." The woman looked at the crystal on the ground, then at the cave around her, then at the defenders arrayed before her. Whatever she'd experienced had broken something essential in her. Fall back, she ordered her remaining soldiers, her voice hollow. Fall back. We're done here. In the aftermath of the battle, we tended wounds and mourned those we'd lost. Two of the guardians, members of that ancient order who'd given their lives protecting a secret they'd inherited, were buried in a small chamber off the main cavern, with ceremonies that blended traditions spanning centuries. The attacking force had retreated entirely, their leader's psychological break apparently extending to her entire command structure. Will they come back? I asked Daniel as we sat watching the crystals pulse in their eternal rhythm. Eventually, someone will. The world doesn't give up easily on mysteries like this. But we'll be ready. We've always been ready. The time had come to make our choice. Lucia had already made hers. She would stay with Sofia, the sisters reunited not just by blood but by shared purpose. The Morrison parents, surprising everyone, chose to leave, but only to close out their lives in the normal world before returning. Give us a year, Richard Morrison said. There are people who need to know we're okay. Grandchildren who deserve to see our faces one more time. Then we'll be back. Ryan Hartwell would leave with the Morrisons, carrying carefully crafted stories of closure for the families who still waited. The official narrative would be maintained. The Evergreen Seven were gone, lost to the mountains they loved. But the truth would live on in this chamber, protected by those who understood its importance. Jacob Rawlings didn't hesitate. I'm staying with my uncle. Family is family. Dr. Samuel Wright had already disappeared into the deeper caves, notebook in hand, beginning research that might occupy the rest of his life. That left me. I stood in the chamber where impossible things existed, where time folded and future merged with past, where 7 people who should have been dead were very much alive. I thought about the world I'd left behind, the divorce, the alienation from colleagues who'd thought I'd lost my mind, the empty apartment where I slept between obsessive research sessions. I thought about Harold Brennan, 94 years old, dying in a memory care facility with his grandfather's secret finally shared. I thought about every search I'd ever conducted, every family I'd had to deliver terrible news to, every moment I'd wondered if there was more to the wilderness than maps and statistics could capture. The crystals showed me something, I said finally. When I touched that first fragment in Harold Brennan's room, I saw you, all of you, but I also saw myself. Here, standing exactly where I'm standing now, part of something larger than I'd ever imagined. Catherine nodded. The likely branches show you staying. But possibility isn't destiny. The choice has to be yours. I looked around the chamber one more time. At Sofia and Lucia, sisters reunited. At Bear Rawlings, the soldier who'd found his final post. At the crystals that pulsed with knowledge spanning eternities. At the cave entrance, beyond which lay a world that would never know what existed here. I've spent my whole life looking for people who were lost, I said. I finally found them. All of them. And I found myself in the process. I smiled. I'm home. 3 years later, I'm recording this story not from that crystal chamber, but from a small cabin in the San Juan Mountains, one of several scattered throughout the region that serves as housing for the Guardians. We've grown in that time. New members recruited carefully, tested through their own journeys to this hidden place. The Morrison parents returned as promised, their grandchildren believing them to be living out retirement in remote wilderness. Ryan Hartwell visits when he can, carrying news of the outside world. The woman who led the attack against us, I later learned, resigned from her position and spent months in psychiatric care. She's living quietly now, in a small town far from any mountains. The organization she served has fragmented, its purpose lost. The crystals showed her truth, and truth has consequences. As for me, I found what I was searching for all those years. Not just the Evergreen Seven, though that was miracle enough. I found purpose. I found family. I found the answer to the question that had driven me since childhood. Does the universe have more mysteries than we can imagine? Yes. Yes, it does. And some of those mysteries are worth protecting with everything we have. The last photograph ever taken of the Evergreen Seven shows them standing at a trailhead, smiling. But if you look closely, if you look with eyes that have seen the impossible, you might notice something strange about that photograph. The way Daniel Hartwell seems to be looking directly at the camera, but also at something beyond it. The way Catherine Price's expression holds knowledge that doesn't quite fit the moment. They knew. Even then, on some level, they knew where they were going, what they would find, what they would become. And now, so do you. The mountains keep their secrets. But not all secrets are meant to stay buried. Some are meant to be shared, one story at a time, with those who have the courage to listen, those who have the wisdom to wonder, those who refuse to accept the easy answer. Welcome to the truth. Welcome home.